Look around the room you're sitting in. Your phone, your chair, your shoes, your TV, the mug on your desk. Odds are, nearly every single object you can see spent weeks of its life sealed inside a corrugated steel box, 8 feet wide, stacked 20 high on a ship the size of 4 football fields. 80 to 90% of everything humanity trades travels this way. And here's the strange part. The box itself is the least interesting object imaginable. No engine, no electronics, no moving parts except 2 doors. Yet economists rank it alongside the steam engine and the internet as one of the most transformative inventions in history. This is the story of how the most boring object on Earth quietly rebuilt the entire world economy and decided which cities would rise and which would die. Today on the Money Atlas, the shipping container, the invention nobody notices, that made globalization physically possible. Quick thing before we dig in. If you enjoy stories that make the world make sense, subscribing is the best way to see the next one and it costs you nothing. All right, let's get into it. Every revolution has one number at its core, and this is containerizations. In 1956, loading 1 ton of cargo onto a ship by hand cost $5.86. Loading that same ton in a container cost 16 cents, not 16% cheaper. 36 times cheaper, overnight. When the cost of doing something falls by 97%, you don't just get a better version of the old world, you get a different world. But to understand why this number was possible, you have to see what a port looked like the day before the box arrived. Because the old system wasn't just expensive, it was medieval. Before the box, world trade ran on muscle. Every crate of machine parts, every sack of coffee, every barrel lifted, carried, stacked and restacked by gangs of longshoremen, item by item into the curved hull of a ship. Loading a single vessel took armies of men a week or more. The ship then spent half its life sitting in port, earning nothing. Cargo was crushed, lost, soaked, and stolen so routinely that dockworkers joked about their real wages. Whiskey was loaded and leakage was simply expected. Insurance priced the theft in. Trade wasn't global because it couldn't afford to be. For many goods, shipping cost more than manufacturing. The man who broke this system wasn't a shipping magnate. He was a truck driver. Malcom McLean, a farmer's son from North Carolina, spent 20 years staring at docks while his trucks waited days to unload. His question was almost childishly simple. Why unload the truck at all? Why not lift the whole trailer body onto the ship? In 1956, he sold his trucking company, bet everything on a converted oil tanker called the Ideal X, and loaded 58 steel boxes onto its deck in under 8 hours, a job that should have taken a week. A longshoreman watching from the dock was asked what he thought of the ship. His answer became legend. "I'd like to sink that son of a bitch." He was right to want to sink it. The box was a declaration of war on everyone. Dockworker unions fought it for 2 decades because they understood instantly that it would erase them. Ports fought it because containers demanded entirely new cranes, new docks, new land. Railroads and rival shippers fought over something almost comically small, the corner. For the system to work, every container on Earth needed identical corner fittings, so any crane in any port could lift any box from any company. The standardization wars took over a decade and were settled around 1968. It's the most valuable boring agreement in economic history. The moment every box became the same, the planet became one machine. The box's big break came from an unexpected customer, the Vietnam War. The U.S. military was drowning in logistical chaos, hundreds of ships waiting months to unload in a single harbor. McLean convinced the Pentagon to containerize the supply chain, and the chaos evaporated. But the masterstroke was on the way home. His ships were returning from Asia empty. So McLean stopped in Japan, where an export miracle was warming up with nowhere cheap to ship. Japanese TVs and cameras filled the empty boxes to America. The Pentagon paid for the war run. Japan's exports rode home nearly free. Globalization's first great trade route was, in effect, a military subsidy. Now the numbers went vertical. A ship that once sat in port for a week loads today in under 24 hours. Theft collapsed to near zero. You can't pilfer whiskey from a sealed steel box you can't open. Insurance costs fell with it. Crews shrank while cargo grew 100-fold. And because ships only earn money while moving, every hour saved at the dock compounded into cheaper and cheaper trade. The cost of shipping goods across an ocean fell so far that it did something economists once thought impossible. It effectively stopped existing. Moving a sweater from a factory in Asia to a shelf in Europe costs a few cents. Distance, the force that shaped all of human commerce since the first camel caravan, stopped mattering. But cheap has a body count. The box didn't need the old ports. It needed flat land and deep water. So the great harbor cities that had ruled trade for centuries watched it walk away. Manhattan's piers, once the busiest on Earth, were derelict within 15 years. London's docklands, the heart of the British Empire, closed entirely. Liverpool, San Francisco, dozens more. The ships simply stopped coming. Longshore employment fell by roughly 90%, and with it went entire working-class worlds, the neighborhoods, the unions, the culture. It happened in barely one generation, and almost no politician saw it coming. The box never asked permission. And where the old ports died, the box crowned new kings. Rotterdam bulldozed and rebuilt itself into Europe's gateway. Busan rose with Korea. Shenzhen, a fishing village of 30,000 people in 1980, became a metropolis of 13 million because it sat next to deep water when China opened for business. And Singapore, a tiny island with no resources at all, understood earlier than anyone that in the container age, the greatest fortune belongs not to who makes things, but to who sits at the crossroads and moves them. Hold that thought. Singapore gets its own episode next. The point is brutal and simple. The box redrew the map of wealth, and geography's winners were chosen by Crane. Here's the deepest consequence, the one that explains your whole world. When shipping was expensive, factories had to sit near their customers. American goods made in America, European goods in Europe. When shipping became effectively free, that constraint vanished. Suddenly a company could design in California, source screens in Korea, chips in Taiwan, assembly in China, and still undercut a hometown factory. The box didn't just move globalization's goods. The box is why globalization happened when it did, and why it took the shape it took. Every debate about offshoring, trade deficits, and rust belts is, at its root, a debate about 16 cents a ton. Today the system operates at a scale that borders on science fiction. The largest ships carry over 24,000 containers, a wall of steel 400 meters long, stacking cargo higher than the bridge itself. Lined up, one ship's boxes would form a train stretching over 100 kilometers, and the crew running this floating city of freight, about 22 people, one human per 1,100 boxes. The cranes are automated, the routing is algorithmic, the paperwork is digital. The world's entire material life flows through a system so efficient it has become invisible, which is exactly when systems become dangerous. Because we found out what happens when the invisible machine hiccups. In 2021, pandemic demand and clogged ports pushed the price of moving one box from Shanghai to Los Angeles from $2,000 to over $20,000. Ships anchored for weeks outside ports. Shelves emptied. Inflation surged worldwide. And when one single ship, the Ever Given, wedged itself across the Suez Canal for 6 days, it held up $10 billion of trade per day. The lesson landed hard. The box made the world economy hyper-efficient by making it hyper-concentrated. We optimized away every inch of slack. Efficiency, it turns out, is just fragility wearing a nicer suit. There's a money footnote worth knowing. Shipping was historically a terrible business. Brutal cycles, chronic overcapacity, bankruptcies. Then the 2021 squeeze handed the container lines the greatest windfall in maritime history. In 2 years, the industry earned more profit than in the previous 2 decades combined. Maersk and MSC made so much money, they began buying airlines, ports, and logistics firms, turning from shipping companies into something closer to arteries of the world economy that also own the heart. The box created a commodity business. The crisis revealed it had quietly become an oligopoly. So what does the box teach? That world-changing technology doesn't have to be clever, it has to be agreed upon. The container did nothing a wooden crate couldn't do. Its superpower was sameness. The same corners, the same width, the same twist lock in Shanghai, Rotterdam, and Long Beach. Standards are the invisible infrastructure of civilization. The shipping container, the electrical plug, the internet protocol. They generate no headlines and win no design awards. They just quietly determine what is possible. The 20th century's greatest economic revolution wasn't announced. It was standardized. Next time you pass a port or a train stacked with steel boxes, remember what you're actually looking at. The machine that decided where cities rise, what your job competes with, and why your shelves are full. The most important invention you never think about. If this changed how you see the stuff around you, do 3 quick things. Tap like so more people find the video. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And turn on notifications because next time we visit the tiny island that understood the box before anyone else. No farmland, no oil, no fresh water, and it built the most efficient economy on Earth at the world's busiest crossroads. Singapore, the country that shouldn't exist. All the sources are in the description. This has been the Money Atlas. See you in the next one.